What's up, guys? It's your girl Matt Cox with MA Couture Crafting. I just wanted to pop in really quickly to talk to you guys about this project. I finally got it right, like where I feel good about it. Oh, okay, let's stop that. Where I feel good about this. This is a wreath. Oh, turning it the wrong way. This is done in the Daydreamer collection. I have done another fold and stitch wreath on my channel. However, I didn't like the dimensions of the second wreath. This second wreath sits on here gorgeous. And I explain how to shrink this to get this to be the proper size. I really think that you should use the pattern by Poorhouse Quilts to make this because they figured out how to get the angle just right so that you get to these points. When you start doing it on your own and whatnot, it doesn't exactly come out the same, the right. I've added some of those super cute buttons that you see at Joann's and whatnot there. Um, this one is just a better version. And so if you guys get a chance, check out the other one. You guys can see what I do differently. And you know what? Maybe you like the other one better. Maybe you don't want such a small wreath on the inside. But I think the dimensions of this just look a little bit better. It's more obvious that this is definitely got some dimension to it. I know people like to do the stitch and fold wreath with the one layer, but the two layer just looks better, in my opinion. Also, I get questions all the time about how I attach this one, the smaller one, to this. I've seen people staple it, but I couldn't figure out where they were stapling it not to see it. I grabbed a hot glue gun and I hot glued this sucker right onto the second one. I haven't had any problems with it coming out or anything like that. It looks beautiful on a table like this. It looks beautiful hung up. And I even love it when people put stuff in the center. Like if I went to Michael's and found some of those butterflies that you can clip on, they would look really cool here. You know me, I want to put a bow on everything. Be glad that I didn't put a bow on my Mickey Mouse hat today, okay? But a bow in the center of this would be really cool. Get creative, do your thing. I love it. I think this is a much, 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 much better version of it. I think this comes out to be about 21 inches across. If you guys would like to see this, please, please, please keep watching, and I will check in with you guys later. Okay, bye-bye. The first fold and stitch wreath that I did was cool, but I wanted to make that center portions even smaller so that you could really see that there were two separate wreaths that were put together. So I decided to do another video because, why not? I wanted to try it again. So I am grabbing some Bozel. I went all around the world and found a quilt shop that was actually closed, but they went ahead and sold this to me anyway. Bozel is a lovely find. This is one-sided fusible Bozel, and I like it. I've used it before and I enjoy it. If you need to get those wrinkles out, you can steam it. You can't steam it from obviously the side that you need to fuse, but you can kind of get some of those wrinkles out. I did not do it here. However, I was kind of moving around it. You'll see I'll start flipping stuff over and using the parts that are smooth and not creased because coming in this bag, you will find that it's creased. They have single-sided fusible, which is what I'm using, and they have complete sew-in Bozel, and they might even have double-sided fusible. I'm not sure. I don't know that I've ever worked with double-sided fusible Bozel, but I do like Bozel better than the Pellon for this project because it's a little bit thinner. I don't like the super hard Pellon for this. So I am cutting down the first layer according to the instructions. They tell you what to do, they walk you through it, and they're pretty good instructions. They don't tell you about the fusible, what size to get for the fusible, which is kind of funky, but other than that, you can figure it out. It's not difficult. And most people are probably doing this project with their scraps, so they are probably not buying a ton of yardage for this. I have been Daydreamer crazy. I mean, just Daydreamer obsessed. So I went ahead and did this project out of some more Daydreamer and her true colors. This is all Tula Pink fabric, including the solid. The solid is one of her super pretty dragon's breath colors. I forget the name of it, but it's that golden, like the golden lemon color. It's super pretty. So now for the smaller wreath in the center, I shrunk the original pattern down to 67%. I think in the very first one, I only did 80%, and I really wasn't pleased with how small the center wreath. I mean, it came out okay, but I wanted it smaller. So what I was trying to do was I was shrinking it down until I got pretty close to a nice round number. And the number that it ended up being, and when I say the number, the inches, because you're working with squares, was 4 inches. And that's the size of the smaller wreath that I'm really comfortable with. I think this is going to be kind of my go-to for this wreath is to get to work with the 4 inch circle on the inside if I'm doing the same size, which is given in the regular instructions. The instructions are not included for doing the second size wreath, so you're going to need to follow my instructions, which is shrink down the original pattern. And I did that at my home printer. I didn't go to Staples or anything like that. I just shrunk it down to 67%, and that gave me a 4 inch square. And I cut everything according to that. So if the actual square is 4 inches, the applique that goes on top of it is going to be 3 inches because you want half on all the sides. You want a 1/2 inch on all the sides. Not difficult. You'll see it in a second. So you'll definitely see it. This is not tricky. It just sounds tricky because I'm probably overcomplicating this. But really, you basically are fusing down a piece of applique onto this foam, and then you stitch around it, and then you fold it over and stitch it. That's really what it is. So here's where it gets good. I was just cutting out the pieces before, but let's look at this. So we've got our squares all cut out. We have our applique squares, which are to the left. We have the foam that's cut out at 4 inches. And then we have these squares that are going to go over the foam that are cut out at 5 inches. And you'll see why we do that in a second. So what you're going to do is take this square. I'm working on the larger one, and you're going to cut a hole in the middle of it. Not a super huge hole, but big enough for you to be able to turn it inside out. Take this piece of foam and try to center it as best you can. Then you're going to fuse it on the fusible side, and you can totally see the fusible. The other side is just fabricy, so you totally know which side is fusible. It's shiny. Let that cool, and then you're going to stack it on top of the other square. So let's do that again with the small ones. We are going to put it in the middle, and you are going to fuse this, and this is going to be the back. The side that you fuse is the back. Now, after you fuse it, you take the other square and you layer it on there, right sides together. Now, you can see I didn't put that directly center, but that's okay because that's why we cut it so much larger, is to give us some wiggle room. I'm switching my foot to a zipper foot. So now we are going to take our top fabric and we're going to put these right sides together. And you can see that the foam is fused to that backing fabric. And now we're going to just zip around the sides. Now I used my needle moving function to move that needle over so that it gets right next to the foam, but you really don't want it to touch the foam. You do not want to sew into the foam, which is why I really like the zipper foot for this. It sits right next to it, and I don't have an issue with anything hitting the foam and not letting it go through. And I just lift that presser foot and swing it on around. I have shortened my stitch length to maybe if I sew regularly on a 2.5, I've shortened it to a 2.0, maybe even a 1.9, 1.8. Be careful with that in case you have to do any seam ripping. You don't want it to be too small, but you do want to shorten it because you're going to be tugging and pulling all on this, and you want it to be nice and secure. So I actually sew right over the area where I start. I just sew right over it. And then after that, you're going to take your scissors and you are going to trim everything to about 1/8 of an inch away from that seam, just to reduce some bulk. So I like to start with the corners and then just go up a little bit and just go all the way around. I prefer to do this with scissors rather than a rotary cutter. And I'm doing the same thing for my little mini squares. I went ahead, put them right sides together, and I'm going around all of the edges and closing this up. You're going to use that hole that you cut in the middle of the fabric to turn it right sides out. And then the foam will be encased in there nice and tight, which is why we really want to be sure to get that needle right next to it. I like to flatten out the fabric by the hole just so that it's smooth for my applique. Not that anybody's going to touch it or anybody's going to know, but I'm flipping all my things inside out and I'm using my clover point turner, which I think is my favorite tool for these little corners. I have a couple of different ways that I do it, but I've noticed that I've been grabbing my clover point turner way more than anything else lately. And so again, you just poke out those corners and smooth it out. Don't be concerned about any of those wrinkles. I mean, we just crumpled it up and unfolded it. So yeah, they're going to have some wrinkles. But when you hit it with an iron, they go away just like that. Then you're going to grab your applique piece, peel the paper backing off if you haven't done so already, and go on ahead and fuse that puppy down right dead center, as center as you can get it. And there you go. You do that for the small ones, you do that for the big ones. Then you stitch around it with a zigzag stitch or a decorative stitch, but remember it's applique, so you've got to get it down in this raw edge applique. So you've got to get it secured down even though you've pressed it with your iron. So I did a zigzag stitch. I always want to do a decorative stitch, but I'm not patient enough. And here you can see I made that 67% and the other one is at 100%. And that whole square there, or that little funky looking square, is the small one measures 4 inches. So I just kept playing with it until I got it to 4 inches, which is the size that I feel most comfortable with. Use my not fabric scissors, my regular scissors, to cut out the paper. Now I'm just using the paper template with my ruler on top of it so that I don't damage the paper template. And I'm drawing a line. You can use just about any marker you want to with this because you're not going to see it. You don't want one that's going to bleed, but you don't have to worry about it because you're going to sew down this and then you're going to fold it and you won't see it. I am using a friction pin because that's what I have. Although be careful with friction pins on stuff where you're going to see it because I've had friction pins bleach the heck out of my fabric. I wrote a word on the fabric one time just being so secure, and turns out that friction pin bleached the fabric and the words are in there forever. So be careful with your friction pins. They work lovely on some fabrics, and some fabrics they bleach them and then you have a boo-boo. When you are drawing this line, be sure that you're about to sew it because this can get confusing. It seems like you can just flip it around and that's not an issue, but if you sew one of these upside down, you will know it. So what they suggest doing is actually marking the top with a pin or a clip. As you can see to the left of the screen, I had actually marked them with a clover, with a clippy clip. Now I'm putting them backs together, but be sure that you're not lining up that line. You want to line up the corners. Do not line up that line with another line. See the lines on the right? When you flip it, the line's still on the right. Be careful. Do not do that the wrong way. You'll have a mess. And of course, we have shortened stitch length again because we're sewing these two together. Now, you don't want to start on the outside. You want to start kind of where the applique meets. Then you're going to back stitch to the top, and then you're going to drive all the way down, and then back stitch again. The point of this is to not end your stitch at the end of the square because then you have a little tail hanging. You really want that to end, in a neat fashion. So I just back it up some so that it ends closer to the center where you will not see any strings and things. Just another little tip for that. So yeah, use your reverse button and back up a little bit and try to stop, not at the edge. And there you have it. They are sewn together and you're ready to add your next one on. I did 2 sets of 2 and then another set of 2 until I got half of it done, and then I joined the other 2 halves. It's kind of like when you're doing strips, you kind of want to even out how you're sewing things just so that you don't get any skewed sewing going on. So again, I did 2 and 2 and then 2 again, and then once I got the whole half, I joined the halves together. And I do the same thing for the large ones. There's nothing different except for the size. Ooh, so pretty. Now, to attach these points to one another, most people would probably stitch this. And I tried to stitch it. It happened. My handwork is not fun. I don't like to bind by hand. I don't like to sit there and slow stitch. I have an EPP project going. That's my EPP kit to the left. Not loving it. However, you can just do a quick little stitch here. The instructions tell you can do it by hand or you could actually do this by machine. If you are putting a button right here where they join, you are golden to do this by a machine. Do not waste your time. Well, I shouldn't say waste your time. Pick the method that suits you best. I tried to hand stitch a little bit, then I got bored and I went ahead and glued it. The first one I glued with the hot glue gun. This time I used super glue. Loved it. And boy, it's stiff. I totally super glued. Some of them I super glued, some of them I tacked down. And I really love using super glue. I didn't even have to do the first layer. I could have just glued it straight to the buttons. For these buttons, I do a little prep work. They have that hook in the back of them for the button to actually be a button. But I decided that I wanted them to lay flat. So I grabbed my craft scissors. These are not fabric scissors. And I just cut that off. They cut really, really nicely with those Tim Holtz scissors, which are actually the Karen K. Buckley scissors. I think they're the same. They're just different colors. But I use mine for arts and crafts. Karen K. Buckley's, I think, are used for fabric, blah, blah, blah. And there you have it, guys. I did not staple that together. I thought about doing it, but I didn't. I ended up hot gluing the top to the bottom, and it worked out just fine. If you guys like this, let me know. It's a really cool effect. And if you'd like to see my first video, here you are. And here's another suggestion for you too. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.